like. For years, I heard differentiation, but what does it really look like? What is the mechanics of this? So I prepare pre-service mathematics and science teachers in an undergraduate program called SkyTeach. When the proceedings are published, anything that's underlined will lead you to another place, either to my specific lesson that I taught in the undergraduate course, or in this instance, what's underlined will take you to some information about the SciTeach program at Western Kentucky University. So, of course, we know that this will not advance.
One would.
For you today is a lesson that I do with junior level mathematics and science pre-service teachers. In my course, they are required to develop an inquiry-based lesson where they showcase a historical figure from a traditionally marginalized group. So that was very difficult when we first started designing the course, because it's a very Eurocentric and male dominated profession with very little out there that's easy to find. Now, with the advent of artificial intelligence, this has become much, much easier. We go to ChatGPT, we say, I'm developing a lesson in mathematics on rates and ratios. Find me a mathematician from a traditionally marginalized group who does work in this area. And there it is, like magic, and the student can go on their way. And this is a very recent occurrence for us, but it has allowed our students to be much more effective in this area. We would meet and spend hours trying to find the historical person to showcase. But the reason for this is that we know that offering diverse perspectives in STEM, it decenters dominant narratives, and it allows a deeper understanding of social and political roles. We know that if we teach students in classrooms that there are scientists and mathematicians who actually did work and they look like them, and they hail from diverse cultural, socioeconomic, and ethnic backgrounds, the scientists begin to see the possibilities, the students begin to see the possibilities of they themselves being in this area. For example, in addition to a professor, my side gig is as a rancher. I've never met a female Asian rancher in my life, but I would like to. And to be able to see myself in that arena. And we know that student cognition as scientists, that's related to their long-term motivation. So when we begin to introduce children, students developing in STEM to these perspectives, they begin to understand, hey, there were women who were brilliant scientists who had to stand outside the door of the classroom with their ear pressed to the door, begging to listen to the lectures.
Their work was marginalized. Their work was hidden. Their work has to be mined out of various layers in order for it to be offered. It's well documented in the literature. I've had my students present these very diverse perspectives. So what they do is we assign them to a clinical field teacher who is their expert. They go visit that teacher. The teacher says, during the time frame when you're to teach your lesson, we'll be teaching this content standard, rates and ratios, magnetism, statistics, mean, mode, median, acids and bases. And then they begin to work with the faculty to develop a lesson around that standard. And these are the various things we've had. We had John Urschel presented. He is a math faculty at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, but he was also a player in the National Football League. And his platform is to use mathematics of the National Football League in his work to present to students. Can you imagine how young male athletes could identify with this man's journey? Also, Hertha Ayrton, who was a physicist who developed safer arc lamps and who was largely forgotten by history. You may not know Florence Nightingale as anything but the mother of modern nursing. Nightingale was a brilliant statistician. She developed something called a rose chart that encouraged medical teams to create better sanitation that saved the lives of countless soldiers who were casualties in the Crimean War. They didn't die on the battlefield, they died in the dirty hospital. Florence Nightingale used statistics to prove that and change medicine. Emily Roebling, wife of John Roebling, who got credit for the Brooklyn Bridge, but fell ill during its construction. Emily, the engineer, took over, and she actually built the Brooklyn Bridge, largely forgotten by history. Viet Tran and Seth Robertson, young Asian and African-American engineers at George Mason University, were used in a lesson on sound. They use a fire extinguisher that relies totally on sound waves to extinguish fires. Dr. Marion Diamond, brilliant neurologist who studied the brain of Einstein, and also Phineas Gage, the famous brain injury worker on the railroad, was also showcased in a lesson. And finally, one I'm very proud to tell you about today, Dr. Fabiola Giannotti, who is the Italian physicist who has been in charge of the most prestigious nuclear laboratory in the world, CERN, since 2016. So these are just a few of the diverse people that were showcased in our lessons. So you can't see it at the top, but there's a link. So if you want to see the actual assignment that we implemented in this undergraduate teacher preparation course, they have to create, the students, a 5E lesson in their content area. So that's science or mathematics, middle or high school. They have a lesson template that's provided so they know exactly what they're responsible for. They must include a pre and post assessment to prove instructional gains or not in their presentation. And here's the part I'm showcasing today. There must be a substantive historical component using a primary and a secondary source. So we're seeing some literacy connections. And at least one of the persons they showcase must be from a traditionally marginalized group, female, African American, Asian, Latina. And then they're also required to showcase some teaching techniques in here. At least one component of their lesson must include a differentiation strategy. There must be evidence of at least 2 research-based effective teaching techniques. We rely heavily on the work of Robert Marzano and John Hattie because we want our students to be able to provide evidence that there's a research base for what they're doing. If they don't know that it's effective in the research, they shouldn't be doing it in their teaching practice. And finally, they must include at least one technology component. I don't know what your experience is with undergraduates. They can all use social media. They can text. They can show me dazzling things on how the iPhone works. Productivity tools, not so much. So that's where we come in. And again, you see the underlined 5E lesson. You can click on that in the proceedings. So also, there's a lot of coaching that goes on. I think maybe we've all had classes at the university where you think you know how to do an assignment, you turn it in, and it's kind of like, gotcha, you didn't do this the way I wanted. That's impossible here. We have 5 checkpoint meetings. At every one-on-one meeting with the student, either myself as the professor or the co-instructor who's a master teacher with a lot of clinical experience, there are 5 checkpoints. The first one, they have to go see their clinical field teacher and get the standards. The second one, we need an outline. The third one, they need a concept and then a draft and then a final rehearsal. And only then can they go out into the clinical setting and teach this lesson. And so that develops a better relationship with the clinical field teacher because they're given some assurance that this lesson is of sufficient quality, that they're happy for it to be taught in their classroom. They're not giving up valuable instructional time to something that may not go well. What does culturally relevant pedagogy mean to you? I'd like you to think about that as you look at the following slides. Now, I'm going to show you a lesson that one of my students developed. And her historical figure is actually a person who maybe got on the wrong side of medical ethics and changed the way we do human subjects research, even though that was not her intent. She was merely fighting for her life to get better. I had a student teach the cell cycle, and she used an American historical figure named Henrietta Lacks to do so. There's a primary source. It's a photo of Henrietta Lacks before her untimely death. And also the secondary source, the book written about Henrietta Lacks' very interesting journey. Again, the underlined part takes you to all the lesson materials used to deliver this lesson. These are the standards the student taught. I won't dwell on that. These are the next generation science standards, which we use in the United States. This is a computer-based lesson. There's a pre-test. If you've ever heard of Kahoot, that's the technology platform used. And then the students are engaged in the 5E lesson by being asked the question, what is ethics? And then they play a game called this or that. A lot of questions are posed, so we set some ground rules. Be nice, don't criticize others for their choices. And we have a yes side, yes, this is ethical, and a no side, no, this is not ethical. So here are some questions. Is it okay to take an ink pen from a bank? Maybe they want you to take it. Maybe it's a promotional item. Is it okay to sell a car without telling someone all the details? You be the judge, this or that. Also, we're getting students up. They're moving about the room. We have a bunch of middle school children. They need to move and blow off some excess energy. Is it okay to take something from someone else without them knowing. Now that begins to focus the students on the lesson because something was taken in this lesson. Is it okay for someone to talk about you, even if they don't say your name? Again, about the lesson. Is it okay for your information to get spread all over the world? And finally, is it okay to take something from someone without them knowing, share it with others all over the world, and not give credit to the person they took it from or their family, even if it saves thousands of lives? What do you think? So then the students are introduced by video, and again, in the PowerPoint, this is clickable, to the immortal line of human cells called HeLa cells, and HeLa stands for Henrietta Lacks. And then the students watch a video clip. This is Henrietta Lacks' daughter in a home box office movie starring Oprah Winfrey and her struggle learning what happened to her mother. Henrietta Lacks was a woman who was diagnosed with cervical cancer in her 30s. She succumbed and died from it, but her cells were very interesting. They did not have the traditional mechanism of apoptosis or cell death. And so those cells proliferated over. Well, the medical people took those cells and sent them to tissue culture labs all over the world. They remain the most prolific tissue culture cells in the world, all from Henrietta Lacks. And again, primary source with a reading passage about Henrietta Lacks, what I've just explained to you. The students watch more video clips from that movie about the struggle of Mrs. Lacks. And then the students pair up and talk about the ethics of Henrietta Lacks in the explore portion of this lesson. Was it okay to take the cells? Well, Henrietta Lacks didn't say it was okay, so they didn't have her consent, medical folks. However, those cells have saved thousands of lives, countless medical advances. So is that okay? Maybe folks should have asked. So now, notice we've done no instruction on the cell cycle. But by this time in the lesson, and I got to watch it with my own eyes, the students were hungry. They wanted to know about cells. And that is the beauty of inquiry and using the 5E model. So here's some questions about cell division, about scraping your knee. Did the knee scrape stay there forever? And now only in the third portion of the lesson do we explain the content that we intend to teach, the explain portion of the lesson. Here's a short video. Again, this is linked if you wish to have this, and it shows cell division. And then the students do a quick write. I love 6-word stories. If a student presents a 15-page paper, we're bored, we're falling asleep, we're falling out of our chairs. But a 6-word story about cell division: cells divide, renew, grow, and replicate. 6 words, summaries, really attaches in the student's cognitive framework and creates a lasting memory. So they do a quick write, and then we let them use artificial intelligence to do it, and they think they're cheating, and actually they'll make 5, 6, 7, 8, 6-word stories. So I've tricked them into doing even more than what's required. So then we used doodle notes, which was very interesting. We talked about something similar this morning in the opening session of using drawings to learn. And the students are taken through a lecture about the cell cycle. And if you've not used doodle notes, you can go to Google and look it up. Doodle notes for any subject under the sun where they color, they draw, they take notes, and the teacher leads them through the parts of the cell cycle. And again, just showing the lesson is more the focus than me dwelling on these terms. But we discuss, the teacher punctuates the lecture with these doodle notes. Then we talk about the different pieces of the cell cycle. We finish with some more vocabulary. And then finally, we ground that again with an Amoeba Sisters video for the middle school children. And then we talk about mutations. What happens when the cell cycle goes wrong? And then in the elaborate, we go back to Ms. Lax, because now we have sparked scientific curiosity. The students are raising their hand. Well, what about this? To this question, and then you're going to be responsible for presenting. So this is reciprocal teaching. This is a research-based effective teaching strategy whereby the students teach each other. We know it has a very high effect size, very useful. And then here are their instructions. They choose a slide, they display their question, they make an answer. They have to include 3 images, a link to 2 resources of where they found the answer, and then they're taught how to make a good presentation slide. Finally, for the evaluate part of the lesson, they play another Kahoot for the post-assessment, and we measure gains in instruction. And so these are my questions to you. How is this different than a traditional STEM lesson? And what made it culturally relevant? These are the questions that are the purpose of this talk. And then we also do something in SkyTeach where we bring in, I remember so many years ago, I had a student, I watched a student ask a teacher, why do we have to learn this? And she became angry and said, just sit down and do your work. And then I thought, you know, that's a really good question. I didn't understand for over 20 years why I had to learn how to take derivatives in calculus until I understood that you understood the therapeutic levels of a drug dosage and when to give the next dose. Had my calculus teacher communicated this to me, I would have been much more interested. So we make Corvettes in Kentucky, fast race cars. And they're painted pretty colors, yellow, red, orange. And we brought in the general manager of the Corvette plant. We paired him with a chemistry teacher in a high school and a chemistry professor at the university to teach teachers how to teach students. When am I gonna use this in my, so I'm so sorry, we had some technical difficulties, I'm a little bit over time. Are the time for questions or we have to finish?
We can have one question.
Okay.
Question, yes.
Does anyone have a question?
Anyone, you're welcome to have a quick question.
Sir.
Thank you. I think I like the historical approach when I teach chemistry.
Yes.
So I learned in a way from undergrad and historical approach in teaching chemistry. So, but what I've never looked at was the culturally relevant perspective of it. For instance, if I'm talking about maybe, let's say Fritz Haber, I would look at the history of what happened, I would look at war, I would look at, so that they get the idea of how this come about, things like that. So it has really helped a lot. When I teach, maybe for instance, a group table of elements, each one is supposed to go look at which maybe element they like, what it is for, why they like it, what's made with the element, things like that. And then it's kind of all this history about this, it helps. But now the part that I never really looked at was maybe in terms of, like in your case, you said maybe they found this was maybe if the students are Asian, is an Asian person. So I never really looked into maybe those aspects. I was only looking at just the history of a particular concept and teaching it generally, not specific to their culture or anything of the sort. But all in all, I think I really had it's nice to see that this is one of the best ways to teach.
Thank you so much. Your point is so noted. I am a chemistry teacher by trade, high school, and I taught chemistry for 7 years, and then I got hired to write a chemistry textbook with stories. Do you know I was a chemistry teacher for 7 years before I understood that Fahrenheit, Celsius, and Kelvin were people? I thought it was some random name. These are real people. So I think it's our responsibility to say, this isn't something they. These are people.
And also, I think
Thank you, thank you. I'm going to stop you here. You can go and engage later. Thank you very much.